Hey everybody, this is Chanchai again, and this video is actually going to be part of the Chanchai's Dojo series. So we'll say this is number one, Chanchai's Dojo, episode 1. And this one doesn't require gameplay video to understand. This is very conceptual, and it is pretty easy. So this is going to be for all skill levels. And it's basically about very basic and very simple situation reads. How to read very easily what your opponent's doing, and how to and kind of know what to do there. So I'm going to be talking about the easiest reads to make in Virtua Fighter, and this could apply to many fighting games, applies to pretty much all of them. But in Virtua Fighter, it's very I'm going to put it in that context, makes it easier to understand. All right, so first we're going to start with beginner reads. The beginner reads, especially in Virtua Fighter, are incredibly easy. Okay, and it's it's very specific to VF because the answer is very specific to VF, as opposed to how you would manage the general situation in other fighting games. So in Virtua Fighter, the very basic reads for beginners, if you're rank 1 through 20, this will pretty much guarantee you wins if you know the read and you know what to do. After rank 20, though, it changes because everybody you fight's going to know this one already. So, the first read, do they attack way too much? Do they defend way too much? It's one of those two things usually. At rank 1 through 20, it's especially going to be the meaning of whether you win or you don't, or pretty much how easy it is to win. So, beginners and low rank players, for sure they're not playing optimally. It takes a lot of experience and a lot of understanding of the game to play optimally. So a very common thing is the players are gonna just simply attack way too much. But there's also players that simply defend way too much. Now at rank 1 through 20, it's usually attacking too much. So if your opponent's attacking way too much, in Virtua Fighter that means that too much of the time when they are at a disadvantage, they are still attacking. They are attacking whether they have the advantage, whether the situation is neutral, or whether they are at a frame disadvantage because you've blocked an attack, or you've low punched them out of a string, or you've simply jabbed them out of whatever move they were trying to do. And it's easy enough to lock a player that's attacking an insanely amount of too much, because simply all you have to do is maintain the advantage by simply hitting them repeatedly. And in Virtua Fighter, you can do this with simply doing jab with punch and then guard cancel the punch. And that alone, if you're interrupting them, is going to give you a +8, which is a lot. You can do anything with that. But actually, the answer to attacking too much is extremely simple in Virtua Fighter. It's you interrupt them, and then you get the follow-up read. If I interrupt them, if I hit them, are they still trying to attack? And if the answer is yes, they are still trying to attack, then you have a real awesome, easy answer to that, which is to do a counter hit launcher. Counter hit launcher with like Jackie would be the uppercut. That's so it's like you low jab them, you're already crouched, you do the diagonal between down and forward. We call that direction 3 in the numeric system, 3P, and that would be Jackie's uppercut. The risk to Jackie is very low. If they actually do block, they have a good size advantage, but they have nothing guaranteed against you, and you can respond with good defense there, and then continue to take advantage of them attacking when you have advantage. But most likely you get a combo. Leon, this is where Leon's uppercut is so powerful. That's the same command from crouch, 3P. With other characters, you might go for the normal hit launcher too if you don't have an awesome counter hit launcher. A counter hit launcher is a launcher that doesn't really launch on normal hit or even recovery hit, but it does launch on counter hit. And they're so good because generally they are safe. Generally they don't risk much retaliation. You've still got really good defensive options if they are blocked. And maybe they're open when the opponent evades, but before rank 30 that just doesn't happen that much. So basic read, are they attacking way too much? Simple answer, I'm going to low jab them, and then I'm going to try to interrupt the highs in their strings with a low jab, and then I'm going to do a counter hit launcher. Now, do they defend too much? They defend too much. The answer is also very simple. Usually, the answer to someone defending too much is simply to throw them. So, if they are just really, really slow like that, you throw them. In the rare case, they might have this impulse to attack on an off timing, and so that's a little more scary. And so something you might consider doing is, that is a situation where the low mid mix up can help you. However, you have to understand in Virtua Fighter that most characters' lows, most of the lows in the game are not going to be, you're not going to be an advantage after you hit with them. You're just going to chip away at your opponent. But if you're just not comfortable throwing, which you should get comfortable throwing somebody that's overly defensive, but if you're not comfortable throwing them, then simply doing low mid mix-ups will be one way you can do it, but it's just, you're not going to get as much reward, but it is definitely an option. If you have guard break though, guard break is fantastic against people that just guard too much, and they hate guard break. So if you're playing like Akira or Lao, or even using a slow guard break like Jean's or Leon's, guard breaks are really wonderful against people that are just simply too defensive, and you don't even have to predict when they're going to be defending. Okay, so those are the very basic beginner stuff. That's stuff that most players should know, especially by the rank 25. They should be knowing this. If not, keep practicing that. Okay, so now let's talk about very common situations that are very easy to read. For me, I think the easiest read to make on an opponent is the opening. Getting a sense of two things about the opening, and that is, the time. In Virtua Fighter, Grandpa Ozeki has tested and seen that this is actually a timing-based thing. The player who hits after inputs are read, when the announcer says go or fight, the one who hit at that time after he says go, but closest to that time, will win, or at least will attack first. However, in the opening of the game, the attack range is not up close. It is like just outside of elbow range. That is why a lot of, like if you did the simple jab, it would lose unless your opponent did a slow attack that moved them forward in time to be hit by that jab. That's why jabs are usually only saved as what you do against somebody that's very aggressive in the opening. Usually your mid-range attack is going to be the thing that wins. 13 frame, like Kage's 13 frame 4P or back and punch is a really good one. That's the high spinning elbow. It's a high attack, which means it would lose to like a low punch or a low attack, but it moves Kage forward, and it's really fast at 13 frames, and that's why that's a really good round opener and one that you should prepare for against Kage. Similarly, Kage also likes to crush like high attacks in the opening, so you might see a Kage do 3P or diagonal down forward and punch, which is the big slap where he slaps across. And the reason they would do that is it's got good range, but also it crushes high attacks. If the opponent did a high attack at the opening, including if it was a Kage mirror match and they did the high elbow, Kage's down forward punch, that slap will win. So that's why you would see attacks like that by Kage. A lot of opponents are simply just defensive. So in the opening, you can determine if your opponent is more defensive than they are aggressive, or if they are aggressive, or if they mix it up. But to me, the opening move is actually a pretty easy read. It's a set play. It's a situation that's always fixed, so you can always plan around it. So it's an easy read, and if you understand, the more you understand the game, the easier it is to plan what your counterattack is. Or if you're just going to simply be more passive, more defensive, or if you understand that your opponent is almost always defensive. Again, that's a very easy read. So we've talked about too aggressive, too defensive, and we've also now talked about the opening. there is another super easy read to make in Virtua Fighter. And this is the one that Fudo will almost always use as a first example. And I think it's really important to understand this one, because not only are you understanding the mechanics of the game when you exercise this next one, but you also understand the logic or the off logic of your opponent. And that read is what is my opponent's preference for evasion when they sidestep. In Virtua Fighter, we call sidestepping, we call that evade. Okay, now, it's important to understand, in Virtua Fighter, on paper, the way that you're supposed to evade, how you know how to evade an attack, is based on the attacker's front or back side. Their back or their front, the direction their chest is facing. So the direction that their chest is facing, we call front. The direction that their back is facing, we call back. Also, the front, like the front foot or the back foot could help you understand which way that is too. So if you don't like looking at front or back, you can look at like which foot is in front, which foot is in the back. The front foot is the foot that's on the back side. And the back foot is the foot that's on the direction of the opponent's front side. So it makes sense if you look at any figure and you understand what's going on there. But again, front and back, that's the correct logic. So what is the read? The read on an opponent's evade habit, the first read is not front or back, it's what is their logic. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, because you're tapping up or down to do a sidestep or an evade in Virtua Fighter, just like you do in many 3D fighters, a lot of times your opponent, and probably you, have a preference. You might prefer to go up or you might prefer to go down. It might feel better to do up and then a crouch dash, but some players might prefer to tap down and then go to neutral and do a crouch dash. If that is dominating your opponent's, like the way that they play, that's what I mean by understanding the logic of their play. And understanding that maybe your opponent is not based on your character's front or back because they're just going off of comfort. Comfort is a huge, important part of reads. So here, the comfort for them might be that they have a tendency to go up. Doesn't matter which attack you did, even though it's supposed to matter. Maybe they keep evading up. And if they keep evading up, you should attack that decision making. You should punish them for always evading up. And that should help you understand which of your attacks is going to work, right? And for my character, Leon, Leon is weak if you evade to his back. If you evade to his back, you cut off so many powerful options right away, and you force him to use setup attacks that might not score the damage yet. They just threaten to. So evading to Leon's back is really, really good in Virtua Fighter. That's what you're supposed to do. But maybe that's not what you do. Maybe you just simply like up. So for me, as the Leon player, then I can go, okay, the moves that are supposed to be evaded to the up, or evaded to my back, I'll just make sure that the opponent is supposed to evade down. So I'm going to make sure that Leon is facing with his chest facing the up direction. And if I do that, now I can use all those attacks that are really powerful. The opponent's supposed to evade when they evade to Leon's back, but because they keep evading up, I've taken advantage of that. So that's a gap in their logic or understanding of Virtua Fighter, because they're not focusing on front or back, they're focusing on up or down. Similarly, the read can also be that the opponent does follow the logic, but not just that, maybe they're avoiding certain moves of my character, so they keep evading to the back. So now I need to play accordingly. I need to do a lot of things that need to be evaded to the front, and then I can take advantage of that. I should also use, if I know my character's moves that switch stance, I can make a lot of confusing situations that open up a moment where they should be evading to the where they should be evading to the front, or like where I switch it so that it will punish them, and it's just hard for them to read. So stance switching is also a good thing to do if you know how to do it with certain attacks, and you know from experience that it's really hard for your opponent to evade the correct direction because of the way that you switch stance. So again, the read itself is very simple. Is my opponent evading up and down, or is my opponent evading front and back? And whichever logic I figured that out is which direction do they prefer to evade. And then sometimes you face an opponent that's just pretty random, and you just admit you don't know which way this guy's going to evade. So in cases like that, you could actually probably get away with sometimes doing the thing that is the best for your character, the best in general, the highest reward for your character. And if they're random enough, maybe they'll get hit by that. But that's up to the read and the situation. Another point I should make, though, about reading your opponent is you need to understand that, yes, you should observe how your opponent plays other people, but you also have to understand that the correct read is more like the past should inform the present, but you got to be in the present. And the truth is, sometimes your opponent they might use a different logic against you than they use against other people. So that's going to be up to you to figure out when you're actually in the match. You can't get angry because you read the opponent wrong, or because the way they played against somebody else is different from how they played against you. You need to just make the correct read in the now. But you can use the past and history to help guide you. And you can also, the better you get at doing that, the more accurate you feel, the more confident you feel about reading your opponent, the better you can plan and make the future work better for you. You can almost read the future sometimes. But so those are some simple reads. Again, are they too aggressive, or are they too defensive? Very basic since the beginning. When you start VF, you should be processing this already. Easy situation is the opening, because it's a fixed position that's very consistent, and so you tend to see you can kind of make a collective read where you start to understand your opponent by understanding what they like to do in the opening. And then another easy read, Fudo's favorite, which is what is the evade logic, and how often, and which is the evade preference that they do. Understanding this will help you so much, especially because in this game, Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, if your opponent evades the wrong direction and you did anything that would beat that direction's evade, so like a half circular or a full circular, you get a counter hit if they actually did evade. So, and that's huge. You get you score a lot of damage doing that. Okay, another easy situation to read. It's harder than the previous ones, but it's a good one to understand now. Is what does my opponent like to do after low punch? And if you can read the whole low punch flowchart that they do, even better. But if you want to keep it simple, especially for the beginners, okay, when I block my opponent's low punch, what do they like to do? This is a huge one, and you can apply this to almost any other situation in the game, but it's easy to start with, when I block my opponent's low punch, what does my opponent like to do? I will tell you, at certain levels, many opponents like to evade. Many beginners like to mash attack. But as long as you can figure that out and answer that question and have a good amount of success on that guess or that read, you will be in a very powerful position. When your opponent gets their low punch block, they're at -5. And if they like to attack, well, for most characters, that means you can do a 17 frame mid attack, and it would just destroy any kind of attack that they do except for a sabaki or a reversal. Against the 4 characters that have a fast jab, that is Pai, Kage, Leon, and Eileen. Against those 4, then 16 frame attack, because it's 11 plus 5. So understand that. If they do fuzzy guard after you block their low jab, Or if they do a fuzzy guard, then you can take a note of that and you can change what your option is. So another easy situation to read is after you block an opponent's low punch, what do they tend to do? What are they likely to do? And this read you can apply to any attack when you block it, or any situation when you attack and stuff. But blocking a low punch is such a common situation that it's a good read to make on people. And as the higher levels you go up, the more maybe it'll surprise you that a lot of people like to evade in that situation. So again, this video was meant to help you get on track with reading, understanding. It's actually not so hard. You just need to find common situations that are easily repeatable, that have a higher chance at showing you what your opponent is going to do, as long as you're looking, and as long as you kind of understand what logic to look at, and it just kind of adds up and goes from there. We're going to cut it off at this point, but I will revisit this topic again later. This has been Chanchai's Dojo, and this has been the first episode of Chanchai's Dojo about how to make very, very simple situational reads. And I hope this helps you in your games, whatever level you're at. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.